I'm a therapist, and my patient has severe OCD. Every time he misses a ritual, something terrible actually happens. Love 1. Love 2. As he spoke, Phil held his hand to his heart and raised one finger, then two. Then he bowed his head and whispered one last sentence. Sorry for bothering you. In my notebook, I finished sketching that pointy S symbol that we all drew in high school. I never actually write anything down, but it gives patients a comforting idea that I'm in the process of figuring it out. How often do you perform this ritual, Phil? I asked. He looked up. Every 5 minutes. He had a messy beard and a weathered face that made him appear much older than he probably was. 5 minutes, I repeated, trying not to sound too surprised. That was unusually frequent, even for a patient with severe OCD. Do you feel any relief after the ritual is complete? He shook his head. Never. What are you afraid will happen if you don't perform the ritual? He closed his eyes and shook his head. Phil, you can tell me, I said encouragingly. That's what I'm here for. He took a deep breath. They're the man with 2 knives. Fear of death, or murder was one of the most common manifestations of OCD. But of course, I didn't want to minimize his fear, which was still very real to him. That sounds frightening, Phil, I said. Can you tell me more about this man? He swallowed. If I miss a ritual, he comes in the middle of the night. And he. It's okay, I said gently. I don't want to upset you. I turned to his wife, who was anxiously massaging his knee with her hand. Anne, how has this impacted you? I asked. It must be difficult, seeing your husband suffer this way. You must worry every day, especially when he's at work or traveling? He never leaves the house, she said quietly. This is the first time he's been out in 3 years. He's been on disability the whole time. He's so terrified. And my new assistant, Noah, opened the door. Noah, I'm in the middle of a session. Sorry, it's the school. He blushed. They said it's urgent. They want to talk about Emma's trial. I shook my head and apologized. I'll be right back. As I walked out of the office, Noah stood in the doorway, and stared at Phil and Dan. Apparently he learned nothing from orientation. But I didn't have time to deal with him right now. I stepped out and took the call. The school wanted me to testify in Emma's favor, which I was already planning to do. I got the sense they were more worried I would try to blame the school, as revenge for firing me. But revenge is petty, especially at the cost of a young person's future. I finished the call and returned to my office. I'm so sorry for the interruption, I said as I took my seat. Now, there's good news and bad news here. The bad news is that you certainly seem to be suffering from a severe case of obsessive-compulsive disorder. The good news is that you came in for help, and OCD is very treatable. Phil leaned forward. You can stop him? Yes, I said confidently. I'm not a huge fan of medication, but I think antidepressants could help take the edge off while we begin a regimen of mindfulness and talk therapy. In a few months, those rituals will be a thing of the past. My whole team is here to help. I didn't want to refer him out to my colleagues too quickly, but this was a pretty classic case of OCD, and I felt that my resources might be better spent on patients with more unusual issues. Phil shook his head. No. I'm sorry. No, I can't take medications. I can't stop the rituals. Of course you can't, I said. That's why we're here. No, he said again. Otherwise he'll do it again. I was becoming a bit frustrated by this point. Phil, that's the whole reason. Show us, Phil said to his wife. She winced and shook her head slightly. Please, Phil pleaded. Show us. And closed her eyes and lifted up her shirt. Her torso was covered in at least a dozen stab wounds. Before I even had a chance to react, Phil held his hand to his heart again. Love 1. Love 2. Jesus Christ. Had it already been 5 minutes? Sorry for bothering you, I poked my head out the office door. Noah, what's my afternoon look like? He took out the iPad. 2 new patients after this one, he said. Don Halverson. Noah, we've been over this, I said impatiently. I can't remember names. I remember problems. Read from column B, please. Oh, right, he said, scanning the screen. A guy who intentionally transmitted HIV to 8 people. And the other one? Homeless kid who escaped a cult. As the words came out of his mouth, he raised his eyebrows. Geez, Doc. Welcome to the wonderful world of pro bono work, Noah. I gave him a quick smile. Please move them to next week. I'm going to need a little extra time with my current patients. They both sounded fascinating, but the homeless kid was probably hallucinating from drugs, and the HIV guy was court-ordered, so he wouldn't be hurting more people anytime soon. Right now, Phil needed my full attention. I returned to my office and saw Phil and Ann embracing each other. They must have been the most exhausted-looking couple I've ever worked with. Ann, I began gently. Now that I've seen evidence of bodily harm, I have to report this to the police. Do you understand? No. They both shouted at the same time. It's not really a matter of choice. You can't, said Ann. That's the whole reason we're here. If we go to the police, he'll kill Phil. I tilted my head. How can you possibly know that? Because of Eleanor, Phil answered for her. Eleanor? Our daughter, said Phil quietly. She had the same condition as me. OCD? It's not OCD, he protested. Eleanor went to the police last month, and the man with 2 knives. And held his hand. He killed her, a week after the police detail left our house, Phil stammered. The angriest we've ever seen him. Stabbed her 8 times and dragged her into the woods. What the hell had I gotten myself into here? Let's take a step back here, I said. Phil, do you have any recollection of when this ritual began? 3 years ago, he said. We took Eleanor on a trip to Disney, and all we remember is waking up and hearing him tell Eleanor and I that we had to do the ritual every day, from 4 AM to 11 PM, or he would hurt our family. There were 3 rules: no cops, no hospitals, and no skipping sleep. We thought it was some kind of sick joke at first, so we didn't do the rituals, but then he showed up that night. Do you have any idea what the ritual means? I asked. Love 1, love 2, any of that? He nodded. She's love 1. He pointed to Ann. Her sister is love 2. If I miss either of them, they get punished that night. Wait, her sister gets stabbed too? Yes, Ann whispered. She lives with us. And she has 2 more scars than me. How many do you have? I asked. 14. Phil bowed his head in shame. But by my calculations, he was nothing short of a hero. 12 rituals every hour. 19 hours per day, 365 days per year, for 3 years. 249,660 rituals. And he only missed 14 times. That's a 99.995% success rate. What about sorry for bothering you? I asked. What does that part mean? He shook his head. I have no idea. We sat there in silence for a while, and I just stared at my notebook in disbelief. Then Phil spoke up again. You have to help us, he begged. We've tried everything, but he's always watching. I don't think he's human. I think he might be a demon or a ghost. I did my best to conceal clearing my throat. Yeah, I don't believe in that stuff. To me, those are code words for overactive amygdala, which was, unsurprisingly, another aspect of OCD. I like to think every mystery has a practical explanation, set here on planet Earth. So your daughter, Eleanor, she had to do the same ritual, or the same thing would happen? They nodded. There was no point in pretending to write in my notebook anymore. I had no idea what was happening. Father, mother, sister, daughter. Father and daughter have to perform 5-minute rituals, otherwise mother and sister get stabbed by the invisible stalker. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that they refused to involve the police because of this invisible stalker, or the fact that I was about to go along with it. Phil, I need to be honest with you, I said. Given the severity of your OCD, I have suspicions that you may also be suffering from a comorbid case of DID. DID? Dissociative identity disorder, I said. It's possible that you could be the man with 2 knives, and his victim. My God! Will you stop diagnosing people with mental disorders and listen to us? Anne spoke up angrily. We have surveillance videos, we wired the whole house. It's not Phil. It's some sort of evil spirit. You have videos? I asked, curious. May I view them? Hopefully we could put an end to this supernatural talk, once and for all." She nodded and took out her phone. "This is from last year," she said, handing the phone to me. "Phil accidentally said, 'love you' instead of 'love too.'" I watched the footage, 4 panels at once. In the master bedroom, Phil and Anne made their way into their bed. In the guest room, Anne's sister read a book in bed before shutting off the lights. In Eleanor's room, a young teen girl typed away on her laptop before finally drifting off to sleep. The front entrance to the house showed no signs of life. Then I just waited. Phil did his ritual a few times on the couch while I continued watching. But nothing happened for a long time. I wasn't sure if I was missing something. And that's when I saw it. A man in full body armor marched into the sister's bedroom. He had 2 butcher's knives, one in each hand. I'm normally not a sucker for horror, but I'll admit I jumped. I wanted to call out and warn her. If you like this story, smash the like button, and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to be notified on the latest videos, hit that notification bell.